Hey guys, welcome to TCU Lead on Frogcast. We're here today. We are students in an Intro to Disability Studies course, and this is a project where we're talking about advocacy. So today our topic is going to be talking about sex education for disabled people. My name is Madison. I'm from Burleson, Texas. I'm a communication studies major with a women and gender studies minor and arts administration minor. I'm super excited to be here today. And
I'm Jalen. I'm a sophomore here at TCU. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and I'm studying social work with a minor in comparative race and ethnic studies. So yes, today we are talking about disabled people's right to their sexual identity and safety. And we understand that this isn't a topic discussed a lot, which is why we wanted to. When we think about the aspects of equal access and opportunity, these are all essential for healthy development. This is the importance of disabled people's self-determination, and sexual identity encompasses that as much as societal notions want to argue otherwise. So if we continue to ignore this piece of their lives, and all of our lives really, we're really stepping back towards that universal design of access.
So with this topic, you may be thinking sort of like, how does this apply to me? Like, I'm a student at TCU. What am I going to do about this? But we specifically chose to talk about this topic with this audience because at TCU, everyone who goes here is really a leader in our community. And I know our motto is lead on, and part of our mission statement is being ethical leaders. And we feel like part of being ethical leaders is staying up to date about issues with accessibility and stuff. So people here who are students right now are going to be future healthcare professionals or teachers, or they may be on the school board, or they may even be parent to a child with a disability, or you may become disabled later in life. So we feel like sex education for disabled people is super relevant because you are the people who are going to be making changes later in life. And if with this podcast we're able to change ideology right now, then the advocacy work can come later because you'll understand the basics of why this is important. So we're super excited to be talking about this. Our discussion is sort of going to be based off the sexologist Celeste Holbrook's idea of a pyramid that's a sexual hierarchy of needs. It's sort of based off Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you know about that, if you don't, it's okay. But just thinking about the way that a pyramid is built, it's got a larger base and then a smaller base, and then it gets tiny at the top, So that's how sex education sort of works. So at the base, there's education is the base level, you need to know this to survive. And then moving upwards, it's looking at safety. And then further upwards, towards the top, is being accepted in society. So that sort of like goes along with her ideas, but we're kind of making it our own. So at the base would be education, and Jalen's going to talk about the psychosocial development idea too.
Yes, so before we can get into educating, we really have to understand that there's a group of people that need to be educated. A lot of the times, disabled people are kind of put on the back burner of that conversation. It can seem a little bit uncomfortable, or some people might even think that it's unnecessary, but we're here to tell you that is absolutely not true. Disabled people are typically acknowledged to be these asexual beings, and we all know as humans, we don't really work like that. And when we look at Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, in adolescence, we approach this stage of identity versus role confusion. So if our identity isn't accepted and supported, then we get lost in this field of role confusion, not knowing who we are, who we want to be, what we want to do. And this can lead us into some very traumatic and troubling situations. So it's important that we have a society where everyone is supporting the best interests of everyone and their identity. And it's pointed out by the World Health Organization that sexuality is a global issue. This is central to human development and thus requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as that possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences. This is free from coercion, free from discrimination, and free from violence.
Awesome. So Jalen was saying sort of about sexuality is a human right. So being able to be educated about this topic is part of the rights of disabled people, because they do have the same basic rights of everyone else, and that's sort of what we're working towards. So with education, education is sort of like the baseline understanding of sex. So like biology, understanding how sex works, understanding just like basic biological processes, and learning about like sexual identity and everything that's sort of related to like the basics of sex. So there's actually like a lot of resources online that talk about like specific sex education things that you need to know based on like people's disabilities. So like if you had like a disabled child, or you're working with someone disabled, or you are disabled yourself, there is a lot of stuff that you can find online that like goes into the specifics of like if you have this sort of impairment, you can try this, or this may be like difficult for you to do or like uncomfortable. And it's all like really accessible online. So I like highly encourage to go read that if you need like better understanding of any of those things. So also with education, it's like the abandonment of education puts disabled people at risk of having like unhealthy relationships. So basically like without education, it's like how are you going to be able to form like healthy relationships and make sure you're being safe. So that sort of leads into the second like layer of our discussion, was just talking about safety. So with safety, that kind of like ties into like physical safety, like is this person like comfortable? Are they in pain? Are they using like the proper birth control protections? Do they feel emotionally safe? So is this like the sex that they may be having or learning about? Is it like healthy for their mental health? Are they happy with what they're doing? And making sure there's like a safe social circle so they're able to like talk about any issues they may be having, and just making sure that there's like a way for them to feel comfortable with their sexuality, and making sure that they are protected from like anyone who may be making them feel unsafe. So like with the right to sexuality and sexual education, it's like super important that we're talking about safety. There's actually, this is like a warning, it's very disturbing, but from Merchant and Kennedy's article, there's a quote that revealed that people had views that said like sexual abuse of disabled children is okay, or at least not as harmful as sexual abuse of other children, or that these children won't understand what's happening, therefore won't be damaged by it, which we acknowledge is like super duper harmful and is like sort of denying the need for like education and safety because they feel like they don't have the same rights, I guess.
Absolutely terrible. Trauma does not discriminate, and it affects the brain in explicit and implicit memories. And all of these situations are constituting to this vulnerability of bad sex, ranging in these areas of prostitution and pornography to sexual violence or an unplanned pregnancy, and even sexually transmitted diseases and infections. So in order to be able to avoid this issue, in humanity, we need to respect that disabled people deserve control over choices about and access to their sexuality, sexual expression, and to be able to have opportunities for fulfilling relationships in their lives.
So just like sort of relating to that are some statistics that we have from disabilityjustice.org, which is a website dedicated to protecting the rights of people with disabilities. So these are just some statistics about like sexual assault for disabled people. So 83% of women with disabilities will be sexually assaulted in their lives. Approximately 80% of women and 30% of men with developmental disabilities have been sexually assaulted, and half of these women have been assaulted more than 10 times. And women with a disability are far more likely to have a history of undesired sex with an intimate partner compared to able-bodied women. So the statistics with that would be like 19.7% of disabled women and versus 18 or 8.2% for able-bodied women. So these statistics that we're talking about, they aren't just to like scare you or anything, but it's to say that like disabled people have a right to knowledge about safety, and hopefully like educating disabled people about this through sex education and like educating able-bodied people about this, we're able to maybe prevent some of this from happening. Not to say that any of this abuse was their fault at all, but just education in general could help prevent possibly some of this happening.
For sure. Like, those numbers are absolutely staggering. These traumatic experiences are happening at almost double the rate of able-bodied people. This is a group of people with multiple different identities within that group who are being marginalized to trauma, being marginalized to discrimination. And ultimately, at the end of the day, disabled people have so much of their identity and their rights just institutionally stripped away from them that this is just one more thing that has very, very long-term effects. So in order to be able to flip that view, we really have to change society's ideas of sex and get away from this idea that disabled sex is problematic or risky just because it doesn't fit into that mold of that compulsory abled body and compulsory heterosexual sex. Once we change those overarching views in our society, we can instill better institutions, better education, and be taking that step, like I mentioned before, to that universal design of access. And an important way to think about this is when we think about portrayal in the media, how many times in a normal TV show that's not centered around the narrative of a disabled person do we see disabled and non-disabled people in romantic relationships, or where we see them just partially being involved in one? This lack of representation is feeding into that idea that it's problematic or that it's not okay. And oftentimes disabled people are kind of viewed as very innocent and naive and incapable of this, but we're just veering far and far away from their sexual citizenship. And knowledge and education about safety is going to help them at the micro, meso, and macro level for social change.
So like if we were able to have like actual disabled people talking about their life experiences or writing stories or directing stories about disabled people like in their sexuality, I feel like that would be awesome, because you don't just have like a board of able-bodied people like sitting down and being like, okay, we're gonna put like this girl in a wheelchair, she's gonna like be in a relationship with this guy, but like actually understanding like real life sexuality for disabled people and being able to represent that like on screen or on stage is super important, and would like make a huge difference in the ideology of people in society, because they're able to like see these relationships like on screen and stuff. So we kind of want to do like a call to action to you guys, just to sort of like change your ideologies and like recognize that like you may have been like taught certain things about disabled people, or you may have like seen stuff on screen, and just like realizing that like that's not the end all be all. Like you should educate yourself and you should work to educate others, like, and then advocate for them, because like you are leaders and you do have the power to make change. So just like recognizing that is super important. And I feel like once you're able to like do that, your life is going to improve and you can improve the lives of others. So thank you guys so much for listening. We're so happy that we're able to like talk about this subject, because we both feel like it's super important. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Our sources today were Disabled People Are Sexual Citizens Too, Supporting Sexual Identity, Wellbeing, and Safety for Disabled Young People by Sonali Shah, and McCur's Compulsory Able-Bodiedness and Queer Disabled Existence. Thanks, guys. Bye.